there's a financial burden to operate a winery. And you know, 13th Street, when we started, I wasn't part of the original team, but the original founders were 4 men, and they were professionals in other fields, very successful, passionate wine consumers and amateur winemakers. You know, you use the word amateur and it's sort of like it's another class of wine, and the fact is the best amateur wines in the world are as good as many of the best professional wines, the consumer wines. So they realized they had really good vineyards and they were making very good wine, and they pooled their resources and said, let's pool our resources in a sort of a small cooperative, purchase some new equipment, share our financial and our sort of intellectual resources, and increase our production a little bit. So when they were producing 1,200 or 1,500 cases a year, they were selling it themselves. They were doing everything from top to bottom. They had no staff essentially, and that was fine for them. But as the winery evolved, we started to increase production a little bit. We started to increase our sales team and our administrative team. You know, you have to grow production, and you have to make sure you have the financial resources to back that growth and to support that growth. You need to have access to great vineyards. Hopefully you own those sites, because then you have control basically of every decision made from beginning to end year round. And it's not just the decisions you're making, you know, at the end of June or the early July when the sun is shining and the vine's going through a particular stage of its evolution. What are the decisions you're making after Christmas, you know, during pruning time? Or how are you reacting to terrible weather that you got in the late fall? If you own the vineyards, you've got complete control of every one of those decisions, and that doesn't guarantee a better wine, but it guarantees the opportunity, because of that control, to achieve an end goal. And if that's a really good $12 wine, then that control lets you get there easier. If it's the best $50 Pinot Noir in Niagara, then having that control and having those vineyards lets you hopefully get there easier than if you didn't control. So good vineyards in great sites with a lot of access to decision making in those vineyards, I think, is important. And that's not to say we don't have a lot of outstanding growers in Niagara. Niagara is full of exceptional grape growers. And sometimes if you don't own the fruit, that's fine. You just have a relationship with great growers, and you work well with them to advise them on how, you know, what your end goal is, and they can help you realize that with some of the decisions they make. I think you need a great winemaker for sure. And defining a great winemaker is practically impossible. I mean, there are a lot of different types of winemakers. There are winemakers who are fresh out of, you know, wine enology school, and we have a great one at Brock University, the Cool Climate Enology Viticulture Institute, world-class facility. They have a great scientific mind to winemaking, which is very important, especially when things go wrong. New aromas or flavors or reactions that happen during the winemaking process that you can't necessarily put your finger on. If you have the scientific background, you understand that and you can make sense of it and sort of react to it. And then you've got the people who just grow up in the industry who, through practical experience, are just so aware of the process. It's not a difficult thing to make wine, and yet it can be one of the most difficult things in the world to do. If everything goes well and normally and positively, and Mother Nature cooperates, and everything falls into place naturally, then you can make exceptional wine and basically just sort of stand back and watch it happen. That's the dream world, the romantic world, and it happens sometimes, and we all try to aim for that because frankly, we don't want to manipulate. But it's a physiological process, and there's a lot of chemical process taking place, and there's a lot of things that can happen as Mother Nature has her way with the grapes, and even, you know, humidity levels and temperature levels and controlling all of the pieces of the wine production. You know, great winemakers understand the science, but they also have done it for so long in so many different places with so many different grape varieties that they can realize the best potential. And I think Jean-Pierre has a great balance of those two things. And I think great wineries in Niagara are great because they have winemakers who, you know, have that background and that skill set, and they have access to great fruit, and they've got monetary backing, so that if things don't go exactly the way they want, they're still moving forward, they're still going strong. We started with a real sort of generation of ma and pa, like so many small regions do. It was a lot of small farms who saw this as an opportunity to sort of complement the strawberries they were growing or the peaches and the apricots they were growing. They said, we're growing grapes, let's turn those grapes into wine and let's create the finished product, let's value add, and then realize the revenue and profit goals or the profit potential on the other end of that. And I think people get, dreams of dollar figures in their mind, and it's a very, very long, arduous, difficult process. I mean, not only are you dealing with Mother Nature's decisions every year, but you're also dealing with a plant that requires probably 7 years in the ground before you can make a truly high quality wine from that fruit. So the investment, just to start with a table wine, is the cost of maintaining that vineyard for 7 years, the cost of producing the wine in the 7th year. Now, you can produce wine from 3 or 4 year old fruit. It'll probably be good for a sort of entry level blend. But when you get to 7 and beyond, then you're starting to realize sort of not old vine's character, but mature vine's character. And at that point, sort of the potential is finally realized. And I think we have a lot fewer of the small ma and pa type farm operations and a lot more of the, well-funded, operations with people who sort of know what they're doing, and if they don't know what they're doing, they've got the kind of money they can bring in experts to ensure. So back to your original question, absolutely, we're seeing great winemakers come in from Australia. We're seeing great winemakers and wine expertise and great growers come in from France and from Italy, from Germany, and all of those cultures help to make Niagara what it is today, and move it along at a much, much faster pace than, say, an old world country that took centuries and centuries and centuries of trial and error to figure it out. We've moved ahead, 200 years probably in 30 years, because we've learned from a lot of what they did, and we're just applying a lot of those sort of formulas but yet carving our own path, sort of in Niagara.
Make sure to visit 13thstreetwinery.com and join our newsletter. Watch more videos, download complete stories, tasting notes, accolades, and buzzworthy news, and to order your favorite wines.